Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's press conference, UNH-IOL Internet of Things IP Testing Service. My name is Mara Bernazzani. I'm the Communications Coordinator at the UNH Interoperability Lab, and I will serve as your moderator. Our speaker today will be Timothy Winters, Senior Executive of Software and IP Networking at the UNH-IOL. After his presentation, we will have a Q&A session. We encourage everyone to submit questions at any time during the presentation by using the question box on their screen. We'll collect and address these during the Q&A session, which will be at the end of today's presentation. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. The hashtags for today's press conference are #IoT, #IoT Interop, and #IoT Testing. For those joining by phone, please be sure to mute your line and do not put the call on hold. Okay, let's now get started. I'd like to turn the time over to Timothy.
Thanks, Mara, for turning this over to us. I think I was on mute before. Today I'm talking about the UNH-IOL's newest test service, Internet of Things IP Testing Service. Just a quick reminder that this is currently under embargo for the time listed above. The reason the UNH-IOL started to get involved with this is, lots of different reasons, but some of the areas we're trying to collaborate is industry-wide collaboration, using our test bed, working on the IPv6 Ready test program. All these different areas are areas we are trying to expand or work with the industry to grow. And I'm going to talk about all these different things today. We're really excited about this program, and we really think this is an area where we can help the IOL. Presentation outline. What we're doing here is we're talking about the new Internet Testing Service. We're going to talk about the Internet and IoT, what we're doing in the interoperability space. We also have a special announcement involving the IPv6 Ready logo that we'll talk about. We also are going to talk about a little bit. Some of you aren't familiar. Some of you are very familiar with the UNH-IOL. Some of you we suspect are not, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we are and what we do for the industry. So Internet of Things solutions have become a really important driver in today's network design. A lot of network designers know going into a network that there are going to be IoT devices. There's a lot of statistics about this. Gartner suggests there's going to be 20 billion devices by 2020. That's about a 14 billion growth from the current. There's about 6 billion internet devices today. And this includes things like you can easily think of in your house to light bulbs, televisions, thermostats, pools, all those things, pool sensors, all those things included into this group, and this is why it's growing so fast. On the flip side, enterprises, it's not just home consumer users, it's enterprises also. They're going to be doing things like light bulbs, building infrastructure. In the industrial manufacturing space, this is obviously a large area. Cars is another one, automotive devices that are moving around. These are all Internet of Things areas that we expect to grow. With the growth in devices, obviously there's a large growth in sales. There's a lot of opportunity for companies to grow into Internet of Things spaces. As part of that, there are a lot of Internet of Things companies that their main core business is not networking. So a lot of these companies are very good at, for example, I'll use a television example. They're very good at making a wonderful picture, but they're not so good at the networking aspect. And so a lot of the companies are looking for help. They're looking for guidance and help and training on how to turn whatever it is they traditionally make into being a good citizen or working correctly on the internet, because that's what users want. Users want their smartphone to be able to control the temperature of their house, or for their refrigerator to tell them that they're out of milk, whatever it might be. All those things are what users want today, and having those types of things at their fingertips is really important to users today, and that includes things like big data or sensors, those kind of things on the enterprise side. They want access to the latest data. They can crunch it and make real-time decisions with the best information possible, and Internet of Things devices make that possible. What we're offering to help these companies, in this case, is the IoT IP Testing Service. Is really focused on a couple of different areas. One of them is interoperability testing. In particular, the focus is on enterprise and home networks. So home gateways are a big area here where IoT devices need to make sure they work with what the service provider is giving you, for example. Also, you have multiple devices in your house, them working together. Wireless routers would be also include things like enterprises, bring your own device, those types of areas, want to make sure that everything works harmoniously. We're also going to talk about the Ready Logo testing program. That we're going to offer this in this group too. This is where manufacturers will come in. Future areas we're going to continue to work on is 6LoWPAN, 6TiSCH, their physical layer, low power areas that this group will find, companies who are manufacturing things in this space will find interesting. Also, security protocol testing, and I'm going to hit on that a little bit more. Obviously, there's been a lot in the news about this. These are all areas that we think this testing service is going to continue to work on, develop, and help to grow the market. IoT interoperability. This is one of the main areas right now today that we're seeing a lot of interest. And in this case, what happens is we have hundreds of home gateways and wireless routers with a variety of technologies on the WAN side. So that includes things like DOCSIS, DSL, Wi-Fi, low-powered technologies, different areas where people might want to come in. We work with the LoRa Alliance. In this case, what we're trying to do is allow these IoT solutions, and in this case, solution might mean, the tablet connecting to the cloud, which is connecting to the sensor device to make sure that they're all reporting the same temperature, flow rate, whatever it might be. That's sort of what we're trying to do in this case, is making sure that all those components work well together and that they can all see the same information. That's been a majority of our stuff right now, is companies coming in wanting to connect to multiple routers, whether it's a TV, a pool sensor, all those types of things. They want to connect, and it's all the way from layer 3 all the way up. Currently, a lot of this testing is over v4. We're seeing a big interest in people wanting to make sure that their solutions also work in an IPv6 environment. Some of these companies that people are looking to partner with, I've listed here. These are currently members of the lab in a variety of ways. And so these are just an example of some of the companies that these IoT companies would interop with, that they would come in and say, okay, I need to talk to these different types of routers to make sure that our product will work in the proper environment. In this case, who's going to want our IoT testing? Obviously the manufacturers. The people building equipments and solutions are going to want to come in because it decreases their issues out in the field. In this case, sometimes they don't have a common example is we have a DOCSIS infrastructure here for our IPv6 testing. They do not have them in their own labs, and so sometimes the only time that they encounter issues with a DOCSIS-based or cable modem is in the field, and that would be really, really bad for them. So what we're here to help decrease those types of issues. Also, we work very closely, and I mentioned this earlier, we're really trying to educate non-networking companies on networking solutions, such as when to turn security off and on, mostly on is what we want. Working with them on different choices they can make in the trade-offs in some of those cases, trying to educate them about what's going on in the networking, what they might want to do, the latest and greatest techniques for networking. Solution providers, this is another one. In this case, really what it is it's a solution provider wanting to make sure that if they buy all these different IoT parts, that they can come in and test and that everything will work in a pretty seamless fashion, right? It lets them focus on the individual applications and less so on two devices being able to connect one another. Another big announcement we're happy to make today is the IPv6 Ready Logo Committee, which has existed since the early 2000s with the goal of promoting IPv6 being implemented in products, is announcing an IoT Ready logo that will be available in the May timeframe this year. In this case, the Ready logo has had a core logo that has over about 600 different devices on it today. Actually, I'm sorry, it's more than that. It's double. It's 1,200. That's just the host. We have over 1,000 devices on that list now, and that list, what we're doing there is we're taking some of those core test cases. We're just focusing on the must because IoT devices are constrained and might not want to do some of the more optimization type features because they can't support it because they're constrained. We also think it's really important to add things like privacy addressing. That's very important in IoT. You want to make sure you support all of those features. And DNS we think is really important for the V6 community. So this program includes both conformance and interoperability and really gives the vendor and potentially a purchaser a good concept that they can buy this device, it'll work in an IoT environment, and it will support V6, and we're working very closely with the IoT, the IPv6 Ready program. In this case, the IoT program is a collaboration of labs all over the world. Testing roadmap. This is where areas where we think this group is heading. So I've talked about the Ready logo we're going to be doing, and we're going to be doing this IoT IP interop. Places where this testing service is going to be headed. Security protocols. In this case, we would do it today if there was a clear choice. In this case, we're going to explore options for companies, including things like DTLS, lightweight IPv2. SCP is simple security certificate exchange. So certificates are a very important part of the internet, and we're going to work on different protocols to help these IoT companies. Again, they're constrained devices. They're not going to be able to support all of them. So we're working in those types of areas. We're also going to work in areas that are more low-powered radio-wise. So that's 6LoWPAN and 6TiSH. Those are technologies that focus on, power consumption, those types of environments that don't run over just a regular Wi-Fi link. Also, we're working even lower powered when you get into long distances. We're going to continue to work with different organizations on IPv6 over their different protocols. In this case, we have lots of experience with IPv6, and we can work with those individual groups to create test cases that'll help them deploy it. In some cases, we'll work directly with the forum. In some cases, we'll be working directly with the vendors on those types of testing programs. A little bit about the UNH-IOL. So we've been around since 1988. We get 100% of our funding from companies who want to come and collaborate with our testing services here at the lab in Durham, New Hampshire. We don't get any money, for example, from tuition dollars. It's all to fund the testing and development that we do here to help the networking industry. We work with industry. A lot of times, early adopters, we create Plugfest so that groups can come in, do their technologies at the early stages, and then over time, they don't want to have to come in every 6 months or during these individual Plugfests. It turns into they want to get access to the lab year-round. This is one of the things, obviously, that we're promoting in this group is we have a very extensive test bed that that IoT companies can utilize to make sure that their products will work. This is just a picture of how the IOL works with these individual groups. We work really closely with standards bodies. I talked a little bit about this. In the IoT space, this is obviously wide. It's a wide group of interesting standards. Traditionally, we've worked with groups like the IETF, the IEEE, the ITU, T11 for fiber channel, those types of areas where we work with individual standards bodies. An important part of what we do is as we work with those standards bodies, we're also looking for issues, parts of those standards that might have gaps for interoperability, for example, where devices aren't working together because something's unclear in a standard. It often helps to have someone like us that's neutral to give them that feedback instead of the individual companies. We're also working very closely with the user groups. In this case, it would be test solution providers, service providers, maybe even data centers, depending on what they're trying to do. And we're taking their ideas and creating feedback and results that they can find useful. We don't want to be creating test cases that aren't useful to the user groups. And then the last group is developers. They want to send us device, get back results to make sure their prototypes, their latest things work properly. And a really important part of what we do here at the lab is the training of future engineers. So we have 120 undergraduate and graduate students. So the money that we get, we're a nonprofit, goes almost directly back into teaching students how to test these individual technologies. In the IoT IP case, it's a really interesting space for the students. They're learning things about power consumption. They're learning how to test individual applications and thinking up new test ideas. It's not quite turn the crank as some of our other traditional protocols we have here. It's very much interactive, working with these companies to find out what their deployment models look like. A lot of them come to us saying, our system works great when we put up 8 of our sensors, but when we put up 12, everything goes wrong. Can you help us figure this out? And that's where our students are getting real-world experience. They then take that real-world experience and go out and use those tools. We're also working with them with common industry tools, including software and hardware development. We develop a lot of our own industry tools here that we commercialize, and the students are gaining valuable lessons. They're seeing millions of lines of code. Most of them do not get to see that much code. They're learning very important stuff, and that's part of what we do here is educating the students so they can go out and get a job and contribute back to the community. Industry involvement. Those students work with all of these individual industries I've listed here. This is just a quick smattering. We have It's, as I mentioned before, it's a wide variety of industry and groups that we work with. In the IoT space, we'll continue to collaborate with as many of these groups as possible going forward. And this is the end of this part of the presentation. So if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer anything that's been typed into the window.
Thank you, Tim. As Tim mentioned, we're now going to begin answering questions submitted during today's press conference. As a reminder, you can still submit the question in your control panel. I have a question here for you, Tim. What about protocol testing such as MQTT?
So that would be something we could look into. In this case, we don't have anything right off the bat. It would be something we could absolutely investigate. A lot of times, a lot of the protocols we get into here at the lab are based on interest of the current members we have. So if we get a couple of members who express interest in developing something, we can do that. Obviously, there's varied levels of, just doing interop. We just find a couple of interop partners, read the standard, write some test cases that make sense, work with the user groups. Conformance is a little bit different because typically we have to develop a tool, so it takes a little bit longer to do something like that.
Great, thank you. I have a question here from Brian. Are there any current corporate partners?
So current corporate partners is a little bit, we currently do have some members of this consortium that are currently working with us. A lot of them are traditional network vendors. We've also had partners from the sense that we're working really closely with a variety of service providers. User group, that kind of area is where we've seen a lot of interaction where they're trying to work with us on individual ways we might create test cases that they could find useful in deployments.
I have a question here from Peggy. Does your team sometimes partner with other universities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned the Ready logo. We work really closely with the Beijing Institute, BII. They're a lab in China that we work really closely with. In this case, we work closely with them on the V6 aspect, but also SDN. We have an SDN consortium that works very closely with them. We've also worked with labs inside of the US and universities. In our space, we obviously collaborate on both sides. We have this unique approach that we are a lab, but also part of a university. So we've collaborated both with commercial labs, and then we also collaborate with universities more so on the research side, getting access to our equipment for those types of engagements. And in all these spaces, right, the goal is a lot of times our programs, is worldwide. So we're trying to work with labs all over the world, and we find it really, really helpful to have labs all over the world because different regions may have different problems or different solutions, and it's sort of trying to find the middle ground to grow the pie or to make the network better for everybody.
Thanks, Tim. I have a question here from Rick. Would an edge IoT device be eligible for this program, or are you working more at the network cloud level?
We definitely have edge IoT devices here now. A lot of them come in as a whole solution, so they're taking in some cases they have a gateway that's taking a proprietary technology, so whether it's proprietary is the wrong word, taking a different technology and translating it, so taking a Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave, LoRa, Sigfox type of network and translating it to IP and then connecting to the cloud. So the answer is we absolutely do both, and currently we do have some edge companies in here validating their edge solutions today. On the cloud provider side, we work a little bit less directly with them. In other words, we've had lots of people using cloud services, whether it's Microsoft's or Amazon's cloud service, but we don't work directly with the Amazon or cloud or Microsoft teams. It's more the IoT companies and how they're utilizing the cloud than it is actually with the cloud infrastructure company. That being said, we could actually work with those guys. It's just currently it's sort of going grassroots, up from the IoT companies is what we've been seeing at the lab.
I do have some questions here from student staff and the greater lab community. As a reminder to everyone, you can still submit your questions in the question box. What are the key benefits to customers for joining the IoT IP testing services?
So the main benefits for our customers today is, one, they're getting third-party reports from us validating their individual scenarios or being able to take out the first page of our reports can be used for sales, marketing purposes to show that you interoperate with different devices. And the next 99 pages are for engineering. They can go out back and address any issues they may or may not have. And the other thing we've seen in this group, and this is sort of unique, we have a lot of different technology areas at the lab that we test, anywhere from Ethernet to V6. This group, more so than not, I don't want to call it consulting, but we're definitely guiding these companies on ideas for networking things they might want to test or include in their products.
I have a question here from Abish. Do you work with U.S. government-sponsored labs?
Yeah, in our case, we do testing, for example, for the U.S. government. In our case, we're a U.S. GV6 test lab. We're ISO accredited. So we're the only lab in North America that does U.S. government testing for IPv6. So yes, we've worked with other labs. We ourselves, you could constitute us as a U.S. government lab, in that we have a lot of equipment here for that program that vary anywhere from firewalls to routers to host devices, which would really include IoT type devices that want to come in and test. As part of that program, we've got anything from humidifiers, HVACs, those kind of things. So we've definitely worked with IoT devices in that space at this point.
I have a question here from Robert. Do you conduct tests on a high-scale basis, for example, testing of millions of sensors?
So we've done simulations there using some of the giant infrastructure we have here, like big data type stuff. Traditionally, the lab doesn't do a whole lot of testing at scale, and that's really because what happens there, we get a couple of devices from every vendor and do more of a heterogeneous network than we do a giant network at scale. That's traditionally what we've done. We could do that kind of testing, but it's not traditionally something that the IOL's gotten into, because people find, when they come to us, they're usually looking for interop, which means, heterogeneous networks. We have not done millions of devices. We've done some simulations, but nothing with real devices of that size. In some cases, we're working with individual areas. I could see in the future some smart cities. We have a sister organization called the Connected Research Center that focuses on, and one of their focuses is working on smart cities. It sort of grew out of the IOL, working with individual companies on real solutions, and that's an area where we would probably explore working with them.
I have another question here from the Greater Lab. Why did you decide to develop an IoT IP testing service?
So we decided to create this because our customers were coming to us, slightly different. So we've had a V6 consortium, we have a wireless consortium, for example. What was happening were these individual companies were coming to us saying that their problem, they needed to do interop at an IP layer, that they were having issues with firewalls, cutting them off, DHCP not working, not basic networking, but networking issues that they were having. But also these IoT companies in this case came to us and said, we were looking up networking testing, you guys came up, can you give us a solution that would help us develop our IoT? And that's how the consortium, that's where sort of this idea started from, trying to fill a niche for the networking community.
I have a question regarding the IPv6 logo program. What does certification mean? What's being certified?
So the Ready Logo program is a marketing logo. So it's not quite a certification program in that it doesn't have a lot of the teeth, or in this case, which is probably a good thing, it doesn't have the legalese involved with that. It's really a marketing program for manufacturers to market that they have completed. They have an IPv6 stack and it'll work in an IoT environment. In this case, is what we're aiming for. I will say, we have a lot of different programs. The U.S. government program I talked about earlier references the V6 Ready logo test specs where they can. We work really closely with Anatel, which is the Brazilian version of FCC in the U.S. Very closely on they want to deploy. In this case, they're doing broadband testing, and it was really important for them to have cell phones and broadband networks to support V6 going forward. So they require the Ready logo before you can be purchased and turned on in that country. So those are the kind of areas where users found value. What we want and what the Ready, my role with the Ready logo is I'm a technical chair. The main goal there is to create V6 test cases that can be utilized in many places, wherever possible, to help promote V6. What we don't want is to have individual V6 test cases all over the world that have slightly different procedures that make these manufacturers have to go through many, many hoops. What we want is to try to consolidate that from the V6 perspective, and that this will work for people in lots of different areas to cover that your IPv6 connection is going to work great. It's going to come up, and they can worry about the other issues such as application, latency, those kind of things, power consumption, and not have to worry about the IP layer working.
Thanks, Tim. We do have time for just one more question. In case we didn't get your question answered on today's call, we will address that question offline. I do have another question here from the general students and staff here at the lab. Which markets are you focusing these services on and why?
So right now, for market focus, we're getting a lot of interest in the consumer space. We think over time, we're going to get a lot more from the industrial side of things. Obviously, the lab works really closely on things like automotive Ethernet. We think there's a lot of space working there going forward. Right now, the consumer space is the largest growing. It's the one that's predicted it's going to grow the fastest with the most devices. And also, in this case, the consumer space, interoperability matters a lot to that space because users are grabbing whatever they can get off the shelf. And that's way different than an industrial network that might be able to control what they deploy. Consumer, people want a wide variety of choice. They want choice. And interoperability allows choice. And if you don't have interoperability, you're not going to allow users to choose. They're going to be locked in, and users are going to be unhappy. So what we've seen at the lab is a big push on the IoT side of things.
Great. Thank you again, Tim, and thank you to everyone again for attending today's press conference, the Internet of Things IP Testing Services. We appreciate all of your time. Again, the hashtags for today's press conference are #IoT, #IoT Testing, and #IoT Interop. And once again, if your question was not answered, we will follow up with you, or you can please feel free to contact Melissa Power at Interpros PR. Her email address is melissa.power@interprospr.com. We'll also send you an email with the link to a recorded version of today's press conference as well as the final presentation. On behalf of the UNH-IOL, thank you again for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.